Did Butterfree die after the emotional goodbye in this episode of Pokemon? You see, there's this rumor that 4Kids edited out the passing of Ash's first Pokemon, and the main point of argument behind such a statement is that Brock or Takeshi actually says in the original Bye Bye Butterfree episode that after Butterfree's mate, they die. Now, did he really say that? The answer to that is simple. He did not. So how did this rumor come to be then? That, however, is not an easy question to answer, because it's not only an old rumor now but pretty vague as well. As where some people would claim that Takeshi says Butterfrees die after mating, on the other hand we heard he says mating is something Butterfrees like to do before they die, which however could just mean that mating is a thing for Butterfrees, like it is for any other insect or animal. After a point, it just seemed that people were putting words in Takeshi's mouth when they'd go on saying how Butterfree was actually about to die, which is why our heroes let him go to live the experience before it's too late. Either way, it is what it is, a rumor. So what are we gonna do in the rest of the video? Well, we're not here to debunk an already debunked theory, but rather to see if we can figure out where the rumor actually came from, because that seems to be more interesting here. And not to mention, people following the advanced generation might have noticed how Butterfree has been up and flying all this time, seeing it in the Glory Day theme and in the 10th anime opening called Spurt, this time along with his girlfriend. Even the manga folks would recall seeing him in Clefairy Tale and Haunting My Dreams. And now, of course, with this much awaited return in the final episode of Pokemon Journeys, the series, after staying off screen for 1200 episodes, the longest gap in Pokemon anime that any main character took, we don't have to be mad on 4Kids. On August 19, 1997, Pokemon blessed their fans in Japan with a memorable episode that captured an emotional Butterfree fable. For the uninitiated, Ash and teams helps Butterfree find a partner, as is the mating season for Butterfrees. And since the name of the episode already spoils it, yes, Ash's Butterfree is able to impress the cute little pink Butterfree by saving her along with all of the other Butterfrees from Team Rocket with the help of Pikachu and Starmie. And oh goodness. Anyway, so yes, it is indeed a goodbye for the Butterfree. Of course, Pokemon makes sure that the parting is loaded with heartwarming flashbacks and eye-tearing audio visuals, making it one of the saddest, most emotional Pokemon scenes ever. Oh, at least in the English version. So that's that. It wasn't until October 5th, 1998 though, when the dubbed version of the episode was released in US, that some fans started scraping the storyline a bit more than they should, hearing the words they heard, slightly wanting to be misled into the darkness of an unnerving fan theory. So there were a couple of scenes in the English version of Bye Bye Butterfree where vague things were spoken by our heroes that got some fans worrying about the bug-type Pokemon. We had just started dealing with the sadness of the Butterfree no more being there with Ash in the anime, and now we were also having to deal with the thought that the Butterfree isn't even anymore there in the Pokemon world itself, thanks to these gossips that started flowing left, right and center, saying that Brock is actually referring to Butterfree's demise during these moments that have been translated into unrelated jargon which doesn't mean anything. Even worse, people heard that there actually is a scene of Butterfree dying either in the original Japanese episode or in some raw unreleased edition, which is why these dialogues are sounding odd in this abridged version that we've been watching. So, initially going by what we got to hear in the dubbed English version,
if you don't let it cross the sea, it will never have babies. They have to cross the ocean to start their new family.
And also what Ash says,
if Butterfree doesn't find a mate, it won't ever have babies.
Oh, never mind, he's just aping the smart guy. Although yes, a bit vague of a statement, since they say it twice, we sure can assume that maybe they really wanted to indicate something there, as they took a moment to say the same thing for a second time in the same episode. And as we can agree, I guess, in the world of television, every second matters. Very soon fans knew that a much better way to find clarity in this would be, of course, to hunt for the actual spoken words in the original Japanese episode, rather than simply relying on the rumors and translation handed over to us. People obviously were eager to really understand what Brock wanted to say in both of these scenes. Needless to say, unlike in the dubbed version, he might very well have said two much different things in both of these lines. So fans all over the internet would reach out to the Japanese speaking audience to learn more about the episode. Was there something that was kept from the American audience? Was a scene or two cut out which was making the English version seem incomplete? So they waited until they got a confirmation from Japanese fans that in the original episode there indeed isn't anything as such that takes place. And nobody really says anything that would signify anybody's demise, which obviously confused the fans, making them wonder if it really only was some tittle-tattle without much rhyme and reason. And so it made sense to ask exactly what after all does Takeshi say during these key moments. However, due to the unclear nature of the claim, now we weren't even sure what these key moments really were. So people had to go through the entire episode with a fine-tooth comb, focusing on each word our heroes say, especially this guy. And this is what they got. There were basically only 2 scenes where Brock or Takeshi says a similar kind of thing. This is the original dialogue of Takeshi during first of the 2 scenes in question. And yes, about the same thing in the other scene as well. At best, it turned out to be a mild case of literal translation, because although what we got in the dubbed English version was,
"If you don't let it cross the sea, it will never have babies,"
a super precise translation would have been, if it doesn't cross the ocean, it won't leave behind any offspring. Nothing much else of a lead entered the picture. And this much difference in the lines was okay. I mean, come on, it is still an innocuous line, right? Sure, it still is a bit ambiguous, but that's not the only mystery in the Pokemon world. Come to think of it, how did Ash or Satoshi understand what Brock meant in just one go when we're still scratching our heads to this day? I mean, it can mean anything. It could mean that Butterfree would then have to wait for the next season to breed. It could imply that the short lifespan of Butterfree could just accommodate one breeding season. It can mean that Butterfrees just breed with their own generation group. It could mean that they need to breed in the first season to maintain fertility, and about 100 other things. Like Butterfree is indeed going to die after the intercourse, as some monarch butterflies in the real world do. So this is where somebody really dug deep into this to find some clues, scrutinizing each and every word that Takeshi said in the original episode, and actually found a sneaky detail which just might be the reason for all this. As we know now, what we have in the dubbed version is a literally translated line. If that really was Takeshi's words in the original episode, the actual Japanese dialogue would have been this. But since that was not the case, and what we rather have in the original episode is this, it actually helped theorize that maybe the rumor actually came out of the Japanese episode itself, because experts noticed a word right in the center of this line. One word that suddenly became a matter of concern was which means descendants. Okay, fine. The word shison, however, looks rather similar to another Japanese word, which is and shiso doesn't mean descendants. In fact, in some contexts, shiso could signify something quite the opposite, as it can at times apparently be used by native speakers to loosely connect to injury or death. And some may call it a bit of a stretch, but hey, we actually got a link right there. They went ahead to hypothesize that somebody, maybe somebody mistook the word for mixed with the unclear nature of the dialogue and supposed a dark possibility. Carrying on watching Pokemon, initially seeing no sign of Butterfree returning must have cemented the idea further. Of course, the scene was such that maybe at a certain point this misunderstanding becomes understandable, and if this hypothesis is actually true, then I'm sure the confusion would have fueled the fan theories and vice versa, leading to where we are today. Some might wonder if the reason for all this is 2 similar looking Japanese words, how could the rumor have started from America after the dubbed version came out? To that, for now, I guess we can just say nobody knows where the rainbow ends and a rumor begins. So I guess we can live with that for now, hoping that maybe someday we'll know what everything ever said actually meant, where every person ever lost went. Because whatever our heroes wanted to say, watching the episode, it is clear that whatever happened was Butterfree's wish much more than Ash's. Ash dealing with his emotions towards his first captured Pokemon for what's right for it is what the episode was all about. Just like us, Ash wasn't sure how voluntary of a practice it is for trainers to release their Butterfrees at a particular time of the year so they could breed. He just knew he had to do it the moment he understood it's for Butterfree's good. Some fans thought that it was Pokemon's way to get the Butterfree out of the picture in the least tragic way, because bug Pokemons as insects in the real world might have short lifespans. And even though the makers never stressed much over aging, yes, having it freed by Ash in time might have cleaned the slate up a bit for the writers. And maybe they also knew that in the process of doing so, they were working on one unforgettable episode of Pokemon. Maybe Butterfree did have personality, it just didn't get enough time to portray that perhaps. In a way, the bond needed to develop a bit before this sad departure. Not between Ash and Butterfree, but between Butterfree and us, the audience. It pretty much hit everyone in the face because they knew they were sad but were still learning to love Butterfree, and maybe even had just started to admire Butterfree when he did the courtship dance. Or tilted his head like that. Or wore that yellow ribbon. Or as he finally with his pink partner disappeared in the orange sunset. Back in the day during internet's infancy, going by the fact that Ash cried, people would assume things about the original, saying that it wouldn't be much of a deal for there to be such a scene in some untouched edition of the episode kept somewhere in the Pokemon repository, as it is, after all, anime. However, as beautifully portrayed by a deleted account on one of the pages of the episode's forum, I would also wish to believe that our Butterfree with his pink Butterfree still resides surrounded by the Caterpies under the sunset out there somewhere. And rest assured that there was nothing cut from the Japanese version of Bye Bye Butterfree. Okay, maybe there was, but certainly not a footage of a dying Pokemon. See you around.